Okay. So there's my bio, and I won't go back over it again, but basically I'm a native Louisvillian, and I am an architect, historian, and author. I am on Facebook, and that's where you can usually find me on social media. I don't get on anything else really, and there's my email address. So today we're going to be discussing the Kentucky Derby, history of the greatest 2 minutes in sports. So how did we get here? It all started with Thomas Jefferson in the upper left-hand corner there. We were all Virginians back when we were formed as a state. We were actually part of Virginia. And then Thomas Jefferson sent his good friend George Rogers Clark to this area to protect the Falls of the Ohio from the British during the Revolutionary War in 1776. So Thomas Jefferson and George Rogers Clark were actually born in the same county in Virginia and were friends. So it all starts with Thomas Jefferson. So Jefferson sent George Rogers Clark here, and George Rogers Clark had a brother named William Clark, who was the brother, and Thomas really wanted George to lead the Northwest expedition, but George says he's a little bit too old for that. So he recommended his younger brother William to lead the Northwest expedition in 1803. So what does this all have to do with the Kentucky Derby, you're asking? Well, William Clark's partner on the Northwest expedition was Meriwether Lewis, the Lewis and Clark expedition of 1803 and 1806. Again, you're asking, what's this got to do with the Kentucky Derby? Well, here we go. There's going to be a quiz after this, okay? So we start with Thomas Jefferson. We go to George Rogers Clark, William Clark, Meriwether Lewis, who was the partner there. So when William Clark had a son, he named him Meriwether Lewis Clark in honor of his expedition partner. So you got that genealogy now? Now then, Meriwether Lewis Clark married Abigail Prather Churchill. They were husband and wife, Meriwether Lewis Clark and Abigail Prather Churchill. When they had a son, they named him Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. There's going to be a quiz on this afterwards. But anyway, so now then, do you see the genealogy here all the way from Thomas Jefferson? So now you may be asking, well, who was Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr.? Here you go. He was educated at West Point, served in the Confederate Army, nickname was Ludi. But his uncles were John and Henry Churchill. They were brothers to his mother, Abigail Prather Churchill. So his uncles were Churchills. And in 1875, he created the Louisville Jockey Club. What does that have to do with Churchill Downs? You shall soon find out. So first, Kentucky is a great breeding ground for thoroughbreds. Here are some of the reasons why. The substrate below us is limestone, which allows the minerals, the nutrients, come up through the grass. The horses eat the bluegrass. There's nice rolling hills for them to exercise on. And the climate here is fairly temperate. So it's the ideal breeding ground for thoroughbreds here in Kentucky. So Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr., he married a wealthy heiress, and they honeymooned over in Europe, and he enjoyed the horse racing over there. Went to the Epsom Derby and a number of horse races over in England area. So he came back to Louisville, and a number of his business associates said, hey, you know, you're interested in horses and racing, why don't you create a racetrack here? So he leases the land from his uncles, John and Henry Churchill, in South Louisville, adjacent to the L&N Railroad. So here's a map of, I think this is 1884 map of Louisville. The L&N Railroad came right through the Churchill property in South Louisville. So why was it so important to have the L&N Railroad so close to the racetrack? The reason why? To get the horses there. Very easy. They transported the horses by the railroad and went right through the Churchill property. As far as the Churchill property, here's another map of it. It was right near Preston Highway. Went basically from Preston Highway over to Crittenden Drive a little bit further west. There are actually the former cemetery for the Churchills was right here next to the Churchill Park School. It's right adjacent to the north-south Interstate 65 Expressway. Most of the Churchills, though, have been replanted, if you will. They've been relocated to Cave Hill Cemetery. But anyways, the Churchills were right here in South Louisville. Here was the Patriarch's home, Churchill home here, just off of Preston Highway, Preston Street. And it was demolished back in 1965, and they built an apartment complex there now. So the historic Churchill home no longer exists, which is a big shame, if you ask me. So when they were planning the Olmsted Park system here in Louisville back in 1887, they wanted to make sure that Churchill Downs, the Louisville Jockey Club, which I'll talk about later, they wanted to make sure that it was connected to all of these parks, and so they made sure that Southern Parkway terminated here at Churchill Downs via Frederick Law Olmsted's plan for the Olmsted Parks. So Churchill Downs was very integral to our park system as well. Here's a little bit more of a map on all of this. It's a 1913 map. You can see how the railroad came through right by Churchill Downs, and all the parkways pretty much came right to the door front of the racetrack. The first race was held on May 17, 1875. It was 1.5 miles in length, won by Aristides, and the time was 2 minutes and 37 seconds and 3/4 of a minute. So a pretty slow pace, if you ask me. But again, it was 1.5 miles compared to today's 1.25 miles. But the first Derby was not held on the first Saturday in May. It was actually held on probably, the third Saturday in May. And more importantly, the grandstand and clubhouse were located on the east side of the track, not the west side. Why would they have put the stands on the east side and not the west side? Well, they made a mistake, really. They should have put it on the west side. The reason why? They didn't want the western sun coming down and blocking their view of the horses as they ran around the track. Have you ever been out driving, especially towards the west sun, and the sun gets in your eyes and you can hardly see? Well, that's what was happening here with this grandstand on the east side facing west. So they had to change that location. And the original name of the track was the Louisville Jockey Club and Driving Park Association. However, by 1894, Meriwether Lewis Clark, Jr. was nearly broke and the clubhouse needed improvements. So he sold the Louisville Jockey Club to an investor group. Basically, Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. was a very poor business person. He was a great racing steward and horseman, but not so much a businessman. So within 20 years, the racetrack was failing. They basically was going out of business. But this investment group came along and said, we think you got a good deal here. I think we can make it a little bit better. So once this investor group took over the racetrack, in 1895, they moved the grandstands to the west side of the track. They hired a firm called D.X. Murphy Architects to design the new grandstand. And a young designer who worked for D.X. Murphy came up with the twin spires. His name was Joseph Valdez. Joseph Valdez. He would have been, 25 years old when he designed the twin spires. This is his gravesite in Calvary Cemetery. He's buried here just off Newburgh Road. This is Joseph Valdez's drawing of the new grandstand with the twin spires. And this is a quilt of Joseph Valdez and his family. And how I got that photograph was, I was at my Catholic church one day when they had this huge quilt unrolled that had a lot of the original families of the church that I attended. I attended St. Francis of Rome in Clifton neighborhood, and Joseph Valdez went to that church. So anyways, another little connection to Joseph Valdez. Now this investor group also wanted to improve the racing, so they hired a guy by the name of Matt Wynn. And here's some of the history of Matt Wynn, but basically his background was he was a tailor. He was into fashion very much, so he's very dapperly dressed. He was big into appearances, making things look better. And that's why he thought big with the Kentucky Derby. How can I make this look better to attract more spectators to come to the race? And so he was very much promotional for the Derby and came up with a lot of great things, such as the garland and roses and the winner's circle and various other, now that we take for granted, but a lot of the themes of the Kentucky Derby. And then when he died, they draped his casket with a garland of roses. There's his grave site. He's buried in St. Louis Cemetery off of Barrett Avenue in the Highlands. But anyways, Matt Wynn was one of the chief architects, if you will, of transforming the Derby into what it is today. One other person I do not want to neglect mentioning was Sam Culberson. Culberson was Matt Wynn's right-hand person in transforming the Derby. This is Culberson here. He's seated in the back outside his mansion there on South 3rd Street in Old Louisville. So the Garland and Roses was first presented in 1896 and has become an official part of the Derby in 1932. My Old Kentucky Home, let me see, it doesn't say when it became the official song of the Derby, but obviously it was written by Stephen Foster, who penned many famous tunes. Oh, Susanna, Camptown Races, Swanee River, Jeannie with the Light Brown Hair, Beautiful Dreamer, and My Old Kentucky Home. Many classic songs that we still sing today. The unfortunate thing about Stephen Foster is he died broke. He was penniless when he died. But did a lot of great music, and we still sing his song every year. It's kind of controversial, though, if you know the history of the song, but they keep adapting it to match the culture of today. Here are some of the lyrics to the song. We won't ask you to sing it right now. Here's the trophy. It was created by James Lemon. He founded his jewelry business in 1828. It's solid gold and just phenomenal trophy. The mint julep. Anyone here have mint juleps? Okay. I understand they're not as good as they're depicted. I'll let y'all decide. Most Louisvillians do not drink mint juleps. They allow the visitors to do that, from what I understand. Here's the Churchill Downs in the 1937 flood. But they did have a race that year, believe it or not. They did get it put back together. So they had a railroad track that ran by the racetrack in the 1870s and 1880s. Then they came up with a streetcar line to get people out there. And the last trolley streetcar ran on Derby Day, 1948. So you can see all the little streetcars right here. They would come in, drop the spectators or the attendees off. That's the old paddock there, the twin spires, and the racetrack a little bit beyond that. I think this is the 1924 race, if memory serves me correct. But yeah, the streetcars lasted to 1948, or what was that, about 74 years ago, I want to say, that many years. Here are some photos of the horse races. The jockeys, very famous. And African-American jockeys were very important to the race early on. In fact, of the first 27 derbies, 15 of them were won by African-American jockeys. The reason why the African-American jockeys stopped winning races and stopped racing at Churchill Downs was due to the Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws prevented African-Americans from racing at Churchill Downs. Here's the old grandstand. And there's the new grandstand. Now there's one interesting thing about this photograph here. If you are eagle-eyed and notice, there are no light poles in front of this photograph. I'll show you one with light poles, but I love it without the light poles in front of the grandstands. Some more images of Churchill Downs as it is today. Some of you who have been out to Churchill Downs remember the old paddock that was there. It was there for the last, I want to say, what, 40 years like that. And here is the new paddock that they just completed. It will be open when Churchill Downs opens here in a week or so. But they built this brand new circular style paddock area, and it really frames nicely for the twin spires. They really focal on the twin spires there, which I think is great. Here's some more images of the interior of Churchill Downs. Some more images there. I take it everyone's been out to the racetrack. One good thing for us Louisvillians, you can go out to see them train in the morning Derby week. A lot of people go out to dawn at the Downs, it's called. And me and my wife go out there a lot and watch the horses run around. A lot of fun. Then they have this night racing, and they put up all these lights around the racetrack for the nighttime racing, which is great, but there is one thing that I don't like about the nighttime lights. I'll explain that right here. So you have all these light poles around the track, and they put up these light poles right in front of the twin spires. To me, it detracts from the twin spires, and hopefully one day they'll fix this so that they're not in front of the twin spires. The hats, all the ladies have your hats already? Very fashionable hats. Some of these hats, you kind of wonder how the ladies actually wear them, or are they very uncomfortable? I don't know. But very stylish. And other type of hats that the gentlemen wear. A little funny. And the crowds, the infield. Anyone ever go out to the infield? I think these gentlemen here in the lower right are having a little bit too much fun. But yeah, you can see all the time. You used to be able to stand right along the rail back in the day to watch the race. I think this is the 100th anniversary of it, back in 1974 when they had the 100th Derby. See how crowded it was. Here are some more historical photographs of the grounds around the Churchill Downs. There they are. A lot of artwork. Now then, this upcoming week, we've got the kickoff to Kentucky Derby with the Thunder over Louisville, the big fireworks show happening. Balloon race. And steamboat race. Somehow, it seems like the Bell always tends to win that. I'm not sure how they figure that out, but the Bell always seems to win. Of course, the big parade that we have here. There's a photograph of the first Derby parade. It actually went west on Broadway. Now it goes, well, let me get it right. Yeah, it goes, the original parade went west on Broadway. Now it goes east on Broadway. I think it started around 1957, 58. Late 50s is when the parade first started. Little horse race image there. More historical photographs. I love this photograph here of patrons just watching the race. I don't think they were too concerned about the height of the railing there. Look at those binoculars. Again, they were wearing the hats back in the 20s and 30s. Babe Ruth attended the 1936 Derby. There he is signing some autographs. A number of presidents have attended the Derby. I think there have been 8 that have attended the Derby over the years. More recently was George W. Bush. I don't think Obama came here, and I don't think Trump, well, Trump did come here, but I don't think he was here. Yes, Trump was here for the Derby. I think in 2022 he was here, not as president, but he was just as a visitor 2022. Nixon was here. Gerald Ford loved the Derby. He was here a lot, 13 times. Here he is with Governor John Y. Brown and Phyllis George. There's Muhammad Ali looking on. That was a classic photograph of a lot of legends all together. Some other famous visitors. We had Queen Elizabeth here just 17 years ago. And then her uncle, King Edward VIII, was here with his American wife, Wallis Simpson, back in 1951. James Graham Brown was on, I think, the board of directors of Churchill Downs. He loved the Derby. The Brown Hotel, integral to the Derby as well. A lot of guests and spectators stay there. And he funded the Kentucky Derby Museum, provided the money to build that. There's another picture of the crowd. And down the stretch they come. Look at this, how they used to do it. Some of you, I still remember them doing something like this back in the 60s and 70s, but it was very archaic the way they would, before the digital age, to show the betting. Nowadays they have this huge TV screen out there. Hopefully you all have seen that. In fact, you don't really watch the race, you watch the TV screen now more than ever. And a very famous horse racing photograph of them battling down the stretch. I want to say that was around 1936 or so when that happened. Here's an aerial view of Churchill Downs. You have Cardinal Boulevard at the top, Longfield Avenue down below here. I think this is 3rd Street that comes along the backside. 3rd and 4th Streets. There have been 13 horses that have won the Triple Crown. Most recently was Justify in 2018. This is a photograph of American Pharoah. Of course, the most famous, perhaps, Triple Crown winner was Secretariat in 1973. And yours truly stood on the finish line when Secretariat won the race. So you see these color guard here with the red pants and the blue coats. I was a junior at St. X High School at the time, and for whatever reason, my class got selected to be the color guard to stand along the finish line there to watch Secretariat win the race. We got paid, I want to say we got paid $25 to watch Secretariat win, plus a box lunch and some other things. Of course, at the time, we high school students had no idea who Secretariat was and really didn't care. I wasn't really watching the race. I was just standing along, just do, you know. But yet we were there, and I do remember it vividly. I wish I could pick out. I don't know exact. We would rotate around every hour or so. We would change out and come back and forth, so we weren't there the entire day standing in the same spot. But I don't think they allow color guard anymore along there. So let's go back to the very beginning. Whatever happened to Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr.? I told you that he sold the track in 1894, right? But what happened to him? Well, how did his namesake die? And where did he die? Where did Meriwether Lewis, who was the namesake of Meriwether Lewis Clark, where did he die? Well, Meriwether Lewis allegedly committed suicide near Nashville, Tennessee. Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. also committed suicide in Memphis, Tennessee. He was 53 years old. Very tragic, very odd coincidence between him and his namesake. This is the Churchill gravesite at Cave Hill Cemetery. Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. is buried just off to the side there. That's his headstone. By the way, if you go there the day after the Derby, usually someone comes along with red roses and puts them on his marker. And so some other information there. So now then, how did the name change from Louisville Jockey Club and Driving Club to Churchill Downs? How did that happen? So in 1883, a newspaper reporter first coined the term Churchill Downs in a news article. And so in 1883, they came up with the name Churchill Downs. It wasn't until 1937 when the racetrack formally changed its name to Churchill Downs. So 1937 was when it was formally changed its name. I think it should be called Clark Downs, because Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. had more to do with it. Even though it was the Churchill family or owned the property, it was Clark that came up with the race and made it what it is today. There's a nice view of the entrance to Churchill Downs. Nice rainbow over the downs. And thanks for attending. Now, who here attended a derby? Come on, hopefully everyone here has been to a derby, right? I've been to a number of derbies. I'm going to turn this off.